All right, if you would just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Margaret Riddle. My address here in Van Wyck is 5167 Charlotte Highway, Lancaster, South Carolina. Now I want to talk about the survey and plan that has been done. Most of you don't know who I am, but I was born and raised in Van Wyck. My granddad was on the county commissioners for more than 20 years. I think he paved every driveway in Van Wyck during that time. My dad was also chief of the fire department for a large number of years. So I went off to college and I've been back here every month since then. But I have an MA degree from Chapel Hill. I did postgraduate work at the University of Bonn, West Germany, and London School of Economics and Political Science. I taught on the college and university level for 10 years. I worked 2 terms with Governor Jim Hunt, ran the state planning office in the state of North Carolina. And in September, I will be inducted into the International Forest and Friendship for contributions to aviation. So that's who I am. Now, for the survey and the plan. I understand that people were not notified and got no chance to respond. I certainly am one of the larger landowners in this area, and I never got an email, a phone call, or any notification about the survey. My contact information is on file because I signed in just like I signed in tonight. The survey is based on the largest group that responded, and they're not even part of the Van Wyck planning yet. Then there's the plan itself. The plan does not maintain the rural area that we presently have. If the plan is put into practice, Van Wyck will become a Myers Park development. Because the emphasis is on large multi-story houses on large lots. This is going to lead to high taxes and to middle and low income people being forced out of Van Wyck. The plan does not even address lower and middle income people. That was left to Lancaster County. The way the plan is currently presented, I believe it is discriminatory. Some say that Van Wyck plan incorporates information without change from the Lancaster County small area plan, which again, I was never notified about. In fact, last month, I had to call the Lancaster County Planning Department and point out that the land information on the website was in my dad's name, and he passed away in 1992. But they didn't have any problem finding me for the tax. Back to the Lancaster County small area plan. That plan classifies both parcels of land that I own, that we own, as rural neighborhood RN. But the Van Wyck plan has changed that. One parcel is classified as mixed use, and the other parcel as mixed use region, which means development, not agriculture. And I want to keep it in agriculture. So the conclusion is, given the fact that there are questions about how the plan was developed, and the fact that many of the affected people were not considered, I urge you to think twice before implementing the plan. Instead, I urge you to have another look and readdress this plan, taking into consideration the multiple interests that are the heart and soul of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission before our presentation tonight? All right, we'll move out of our public comment portion of tonight's meeting. Now I want to turn it over to Commissioner Maggie Norris, who's put together a presentation just to talk about different ways that we're exploring how to protect our tree canopy, what it is, most importantly, what it is not. Maggie, like to pass.
All right, can you all hear me if I stand up like this? Okay, that's what I intend to do. So Kara is going to hand a document out to you. So we want to make sure it's not only voices in the room giving us discussion, but also a way that you can go through each and every point that I'm going to run through and give us your feedback. So she's going to hand you a document and we have some pens over there. This is why we have the tables out tonight. So we can go.
And you guys can also send emails in after if you have comments.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to thank you. Some of you I've emailed and said, please come, because we need your voice to decide how we want to protect the tree canopy. So what we're going to go through is, why would we consider one? What would we propose? What have we already seen in other people's plans and in consultation with the South Carolina Forestry Commission that should be exempt? What if we do put in some tree regulation, what we would require if a project or a property is not exempt? There are a couple of approaches we can take relative to protecting trees. So we're going to talk about that. And then we actually have some additional scenarios to gather your input as to whether they should be part of the regulation or be exempt. So does everybody have the document before I get started? Okay, so our vision statement for the town talks about us being stewards of the natural environment and preserving our native landscape. Well, when you think about the landscape, trees is one of the items that comes to mind. So our objective tonight is to get input as to what, if anything, we do about a tree ordinance. And we've heard so far to date that there is a big preference for very minimal regulation and not to put something in place that would be a burden to the town and the citizens of Van Wyck. So we hear that really clearly. So let me take you through some of the items. The first, and you actually have this on your document, are all of the exemptions that we have researched. And again, some of this comes from the guidance of the South Carolina Forestry Commission and some from some of the other towns that we benchmark. So what I'd like you to do, I'm not going to read them to you. If you would go down the checklist and indicate your yes or no on whether you believe these should all be exempt items, meaning they would not be subject to any regulation if we put a tree regulation in place. And then there's a place if you want to add some more comments. And I'm going to give you a few minutes before we go on to the next slide.
As far as activity means,
So forestry activity is in the state of South Carolina. Everyone has the right to timber their property, and no municipality can interfere with those forestry activities. And I think, Jane, that's a good point, that if you go further with this, we would want to define, using our help from the South Carolina Forestry Commission to define that. So that's a really good point. Right. Correct. So that's why all agricultural activities are already exempt under this. So in other words, these are things that people would be doing in the town of Van Wyck that would have not come under any tree regulation. That's the way to look at this. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. So what would we require if we had a tree regulation in place? Basically, it would be a site plan that would be required to obtain a grading or building permit. And that site plan would talk about, these are undisturbed areas, these are the trees we're gonna remove, and these are the trees that would remain. And in a few slides, you're gonna see there are two approaches for how we look at a site plan that we've heard and benchmarked with other towns.
I'm sorry.
Maggie.
Is this for individual homes or for development?
So this would be what a requirement would look like, Linda. Once we have to figure out what's exempt and what's in, then we would know how to apply. So that's really what I just wanted people to see what we were thinking about. And again, we would make it part of the application process so that it wouldn't be another process or anything else for anyone to administer. It would just be part of the permitting process. Okay, next slide. So in benchmarking with some of the other towns in South Carolina and talking to the representatives from the Forestry Commission, there are really two ways to go about this. And that's the next input piece on your document. We can focus on, let's assume, Linda, this is a development. We can focus on the individual trees in, let's say, those 50 acres, or we can focus on clusters of trees or undisturbed areas. And so we wanted to get your input as to which way we should go. And of course, the thing about every site plan or every property piece is not one piece of property is the same.
So Maggie, if we would have had this when treetops went in, we could have went and had a site plan done and some trees could have been saved at that
Correct.
point.
Correct. I mean, that's really what you're going after,
Mhm.
is making sure that whoever, and particularly, let's focus on the developers, because that's really what's in the back of our mind, that they are thoughtful, that they think about the trees.
And they don't
that
clear cut.
They incorporate those, etc. Now, if the South Carolina Forestry Commission representatives were here, they would tell you there is a time and place to clear cut. So this is where it goes property by property, and that's why we have the exemptions for agriculture, forestry, etc. There are times and places, and we don't need to get involved.
Right.
Would it be unrealistic if the properties were, under a certain size where you could focus more on maintaining more individual trees, like say somebody bought an acre. So maybe if it's under a certain threshold, you could do it more individually, but over X amount.
Yes, I mean, and I encourage you to write those comments. This is exactly the kind of feedback we need. Because as Dave said, this is exploration for us. This is not bringing a regulation. This is exploration for us, not only this month, but next month, to hear from people in Van Wyck, what do they want us to do? And, it could be nothing, or it could be something very simple. So, yeah.
I have a question. If you've got land that's zoned agriculture, and you decide that you're gonna sell lots, and the people come in, they got a clear lot, agriculture, it's got trees on it. What do you do?
Well, I think that's up to us to decide. And that's when we get to a couple of the scenarios, that's when you guys give us input. What do you want us to do when someone comes and decides to take agriculture or other land and turn it into a development? So I don't have the answer, because this is really about fact finding to develop that, whatever requirements we have.
Let's look at these scenarios we got out here now. Let's take Three Crow Road, for example.
Could I ask, Gabe had asked that we go through the presentation and then circle back with comments, and we're happy to do that, but I'd like to get through the whole thing, so.
Either way,
Okay, but hold your thoughts, write them down on the sheet of paper, don't let them go, but I think we should get through the whole thing and then come back, okay?
you need to hear what I have to say.
Well, I'd be happy to hear what you're gonna say, but, okay. Just as we've heard in this section, jot down your ideas. Do we look at lot size? Do we look at, and those are the kind of things that we want you all to give us feedback on. Might give you a few minutes in case there's some thoughts before we move on. Okay, we'll go to scenario 1. All right, so this is a developer that has bought some property in Van Wyck. And they are either going to do a mixed use development because we have some areas that we've targeted for mixed use, or they are going to create a subdivision. So the question I would have for you, and it's on the back of the document, is should this type of a development be exempt from a site plan or be required to submit a site plan? And you are welcome to add comments such as what's the size of the development, how many acres is it, things like that can go along with, would you like option A or option B? Okay, next scenario. A future resident plans to build a home on a new 3-acre lot. It is not part of any subdivision. Is that something we want exempt from a site plan or required to submit a site plan? Again, it's a yes and no and a place for comment.
Question on the site, and for people who don't really understand, they very detailed, very simple. And I know some of the thing that, when they check these answers, some of these things, a lot of them engineers are basically, you can write them on a paper. So, it'd be nice to know when they get more into this, how detailed that site plan is.
Exactly. I mean, we're probably at the 50,000 foot view to get people to read. Do they want us to go down a path with tree regulation or not? So we wanted to start there before we dove deep into that. Okay, here's scenario 3. I'm an existing property owner in Van Wyck. I have 8 acres and I want to install an outbuilding, a new parking area, or maybe a playground on my property. Do we want them exempt from a site plan or required to submit a site plan? And you can also, in the comment section, talk about, is this residential? Is this a commercial property? Because this is, as you pointed out, this is where the complexity starts. But we wanted to get people's basic input before we went off and did a lot of work and research into regulations. Okay, we're going to go on to the last page. So you've heard me talk a lot that as part of this, we've had some great guidance from the Forestry Commission. They have shared with us all of the different regulations in South Carolina. They have pointed us to towns in South Carolina to benchmark ourselves against. And so our question is there any interest in having somebody from the Forestry Commission come and talk to the residents of the town? This is a simple yes or no, and we're talking to them, but sometimes it's nice to hear from the experts that have worked all
They
across the
offered to
state
come
and
and
what
talk.
they've seen
You
around.
remember you
any
told me about
preserving
a
of the
contact that
natural.
had offered to give a talk?
So
Was that for only
if
the
you would
planning
just
commission or for the?
raise your hand if you'd like us to do this, or you can mark under the other comments
For the
section
Forestry Commission?
on the document.
Didn't you send me a contact?
Okay, so as I mentioned, there is a whole room on this document some of you are gonna wanna stand up and give us comments and suggestions. Others may feel more comfortable writing some of these things down. So our thought is that you can fill these out and you can leave them with us. We are not taking names necessarily. You don't have to sign your comments, but this is really a fact-finding mission for us as to what are the citizens interested when it comes to protecting the tree stand. Thank you all, and Gabe, it's back to you.
Yeah, I'd love to open this back up for discussion. Mr. Yoder, I believe you had something important you would like to share.
If you possibly clear a little bit up, like I said, Creek Road Road. So the top of the whole Creek Road Road, you got people coming here and bought 5 to 15 acres or more. Their property, why would you try to build these? What kind of trees they need to cut off of that property? I own the property, but it's big, big. We should not even be worried about that. Just like you put down here, like, the state that you want to do a building, I bet you can't be able to do that without having to look at it. And that's what I'm saying, we got to look at, see these people off here, and they're trees here, not 1 acre lots. Look, if you up to about what half acre lot, acre lot, yeah, you're gonna have a little bit of regulation of trees. You talk about 5 to 15, 20 acres, you shouldn't have to worry about a tree count. If people got in, just like they know that tree count, don't keep as many trees in, so that's a filtration system for the lot. This will just clear it up. I mean,
I was certain about as far as the forestry work, like, I'm just thinking like on our land, if we were not people, like, oh, let's just like clear the whole edge of the property. So it's like, it would be good to differentiate like certain cases like him, but at the same time, we don't want people like, if I go down on the street on the corner. So like some kind of compromise where we keep the rural look, not just on commercial property, but also, you know, on those kind of small sites. It's kind of, I think the challenge we find out right now. So that you, people move here to get out of an HOA, but at the same time, we don't want to make fun of just.
Put in an HOA.
We just gotta find that right now.
That's exactly what we're working on, trying to figure out what is the right balance.
Could that compromise be something like within so many feet of a right of way or so many feet of a publicly accessible road?
we've already got a lot of that already, you know, now, like county, that definitely can be put in a right. It's already there. I don't think we have.
But is it there to protect from
It's there.
cutting down?
It's there to take there, it's on, yes, Brian, you can't plant a tree under anything like that. They've already got that in there, it's there. Investment, what they want to do. Big thing is, what I'm saying is, you know, got people out here, they came here for a reason, and I take them out, I think, for a reason. You can't go truck down the road, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't set the tree or whatever on the property. You sell under 15 acres, so you don't have anybody coming in there. I would think, unless you got a person.
We always have that person.
But I mean, with a horse, you want to put a horse back in on that property, something like that. That's sometimes I think you have these kind of problems. You know, it is turning the trash.
Which is agriculture and is exempt. And that's exempt.
And if it's under 5 acres, it would be agriculture anyway. I mean, that's the great.
Yeah, so that's, you know, that's what we did, right? What we talked about this. I mean, we had 8 acres and we took significant trees out because we need pasture. But is that considered agriculture? Is that considered? Yeah, so, or what we want to turn into a skeet shooting range or something like that. My thing is, you know, and I respect so much, y'all been here for a long time, is, you know, maybe there's an option for grandfathering people that have been here prior to the town being established, right? Because a lot of this didn't know if equine fell under agriculture.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah, it absolutely.
It's defined in the Lancaster County ordinance as agriculture. And I will say one thing is that the purpose of tonight is that we have heard from so many residents, the same thing here tonight, is that come out to Van Wyck to escape the development attitude of Indian Land or Charlotte or Waxhaw or any of that. So we want to maintain the rural ambiance of this community. And so we have felt, and we've heard y'all say that the rural ambiance is partly due to the tree count. So we are of the mindset that we don't want to change this either. We really, really want Van Wyck to stay rural country. And how do you do that? How do you maintain something like that? And our attitude is the first step you take is to not come in here and buzz down all the trees. The classic example that we have all pointed to is that development, that commercial development where the Chili's is up on the hill
Promenade.
in Indian Land across from the ST. That was a beautiful wooded tract that had some extremely grand oak trees up on the hill. That hill still exists, and the area that those trees came out of are not developed at this point in time. There would have been absolutely no reason to cut those trees, and the whole place would have looked a whole lot better. And it wouldn't look like, from what we hear Van Wickens talk about, that's not the type of development that we want in our community. And that certainly doesn't promote ruralism. So that's what we're trying to meet tonight, to get everybody's attitude and understand that we really do want to keep this rural itself. We don't, we're not here to mandate anything. This is what we're going to do. We've got to hear from the residents as to what we should.
One thing is confusing when I hear this conversation is that we should make something the purpose would be to have commercial development or subdivision.
Well, it could. I mean, that may be where we end up. Yeah.
Love is on individual homeowners, right?
Yeah.
So why tackle both of them at the same time? They should be treated differently. So why not just treat your, whatever.
Your multi.
Your subdivisions, your treetops, that stuff. I mean, that's very easy to sort that out. And the harder thing is, what you do with your individual homeowner is doing whatever they do.
So may I ask you a question? Is there a certain size of subdivision that we should be looking at?
I mean, I think so. Mike's got a 1 acre limit on lot size for a house, right? I mean, that's not pretty large, so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think of a situation, and I'm not sure if somebody would do it, is that if somebody's gonna build a house per acre, they're gonna come down and knock down every single tree on that lot. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
That's exactly right. We
So
don't.
I'm saying
Yeah.
about the nature of doing it 1 acre at a time, I think for houses, it kind of knocks a lot of that stuff out, I would think. But I don't know, I mean, to me, whatever it is,
Yeah.
3, 5 lots, I don't know, 10 lots, I don't know what that is, or a number of acres. Yeah, I mean, 10 acres would be 10 houses, right? So I don't know what that is, but that's my suggestion.
Think about how well.
What about per zoning, like rural zoning or rural neighborhood, or this gets a site plan and agricultural zoning doesn't get a site plan? I mean, you could, whatever the zoning was, you could apply a site plan depending on that.
Well, and I think we also need to keep in mind that we could go a little deeper into the tree ordinance itself. What do we really want to regulate? Do we want to regulate every tree on the lot? I don't think so.
Not by the hair of my chinny chin.
We're really talking about brand trees, and they're defined in, we can define a brand tree or a special tree in the ordinance by there. And we have done that
Size.
in an example ordinance that we've all looked at. We're talking about trees that are at chest height, something around 24 inches in diameter. And
It's
12
yeah.
inches in diameter.
It's
12
24 and above.
for a grand tree.
For the
So that's
grand.
really what we're not, I don't think any of us ever thought that we're gonna try to put in a tree ordinance that has every, we specify every tree on somebody's property. We're really going after these grand trees that are here in Van Wyck with a true tree care, not little tulip poppers that pop up everywhere, and cedar trees and stuff. So I think we need to keep it in context as to what we're really talking about. And that's what needs to go down on paper tonight. What are we gonna regulate? We're gonna regulate every single tree, or we're gonna regulate just specific trees?
Or clusters of trees.
Yeah.
So that's one of the other suggestions is that we focus on, if there was a development, back to your comments, we would say to the developer, you're gonna leave an undisturbed area for us. That kind of thing.
And this is just my opinion, but I do not think it's possible to draw an ordinance up in everybody's favors on the size of trees, the age of trees, the amount of land. You're dealing in stuff that has to do with insurance, and there's probably a reason why they flatten the land with all this like Sun City, which is what nobody wants. But to draw up such a liability and put it on landowners, or even, an acre lot. You've got a oak like this, I think it's probably 400 years old, and, you're bound to leave that tree or not. But that is just, it's really an open can to be forever, just rehashed over and over. And I don't see it's possible to do. I've talked to some people about it. There may be something y'all know that I don't, and some of these others, but I don't see it as possible. I really don't. And I mean, one thing people need to understand in this room, and I could rattle off a list of lots of land, they're going to clear cut the majority of this town, whether we want it or not. In here, we don't want it, but there's so many skirts of land that's going to have such an impact like that behind Chili's, like what they're doing in the Van Wyck Road. Protecting the land and keeping it the way you want it is very important. I just don't see a tree ordinance. For me as a business, I don't want to see another ordinance. I know you need them, but we are on the federal government down there. And if there's any kind of restrictions that you ever want to see, would be that. I think, it's possible to do some things in town, but tackling that kind of a magnitude of something, I don't see it. I think it's a great idea, but I don't think it's realistic.
Which part? Kyle, can you define which part you're talking about? I mean, like
Just
the developers or the
things on anybody's level, from the people that came here to buy 1 acre,
Okay.
horse farms that have 6. It's just, that's a massive undertaking to try to do. And I've talked to a lot of intelligent people. I just talked to one yesterday. I don't see how you can do it. Now, I'm not saying you can't, because I don't like people telling me I can't do something. I'm not saying that you can't, but to be fair, and then you've got legal issues, allow, like y'all have almost 10 acres of land there, giving them have an acre piece or whatever. And you live a few of these trees on your property, you have to, it just opens up some other things down the road. I'd hate to see somebody cut a tree like that now. I mean, on Dad's lanes at 300 acres, we have not cut a tree in never have cut a tree. We've seen people thin it, clear cut it for the money. We've seen it go to the kids and they cut it to the ground. I mean, we don't want to see that. That's why y'all are here and they're here. I think there's somebody here that has a better avenue to do that. I don't want to bring it up. I don't see how it's possible to do a tree.
So would you be opposed, I mean, Stuart had the suggestion of let's focus on the big subdivisions and the big multi-use and then stay out of that.
Developers and realtors, those are the people that's going to destroy why all these people are new in here. Those are the people.
Okay.
Put them in handcuffs and shackles and get them out.
It's kind
Hands
of
up.
Jane Masters.
God Almighty, you gonna recognize me or not?
Jane, after talk.
No, let Jane, I'm left-handed, I keep with that one. Jane, you go first. I'm a gentleman.
I think your tree ordinance belongs to public lands, developers, and not your farmers or large landowners that will farm and agriculture. Sometimes you have to put trees down, but the same trees you've already covered that.
Yeah.
But you cannot tell a private landowner if they can or can't cut a tree down. It's just, it's,
Yeah.
keep tree, keep that tree may be diseased, that tree may be, the roots may be, something wrong, going into septic tank.
Mhm.
There was something. Understand surface, that again would be developed. And there's also plant an additional tree. A lot of these developers, they have their, in Lancaster at one time, had a regulation where you put part of the trees down, you had to plant, you plant trees. We had so many. So that you have to plant trees, and it had to be a certain size, not sticks. You have to put here and plant it. The very same spot, came back and planted a stick. So, but my feeling is that it's kind of, you can't tell the private landowner not to cut a tree or to cut a tree. Well, definitely other lands.
Okay.
And regulate the law.
Thank you, Jane. Can I go now? My concern, I agree with Bob, the folks at 3 Crow Road, we can't tell them how and what to do with their trees. We can't tell the 1 and 2 acre landowners what they can do. But I live the treetops drain like a lot of y'all in here did. The big developer is the one I'm gonna raise my hand and not agree with anything until they show a site plan, because the treetops developers stood right there in that corner where y'all are sitting and told us that they were going to keep a tree buffer. They were gonna make it beautiful. It was, and it is, they did a great job, but they cleared that thing. That was a lot of nice trees.
We have property right up next to it. So we'll be about to do a couple.
Thank you. Exactly. I don't want to get buried in this 1 acre, 15 acre stuff. That's common sense to me. But we're the ones that's gonna have to face the developers coming in, their attorneys. We're the ones that's gonna have to answer the questions on why, not just with the trees, but why can't we build more than one house on that? You know, we're the ones that's gonna have to face that. So that's why, you know, we're kind of asking for help here. But I wanted to know where I was because it's common sense, Bob, Stewart, Kia, it's common sense. The big developer is where I'll stand every time. And that's it. That's as basic as I can get it. I don't care about, nobody's gonna tell me how to cut mine. For sure. I don't want to cut any. Don't want, you know, we've got the same forest that we had when my granddaddy settled it in the 30s. But anyway, I feel better now.
I think the problem is not everybody has the same level of reasonableness, right? We think it's normal that there's a right assumption, right? So how can we protect against that assumption? And then how can we realistically implement something? And then not even the implementation, how is
the accountability? Like, who's responsible for that? Like, obviously, we don't have like a corporate office here in our town, so realistically, what is that gonna look like for Van Wyck? You know, we can make all the rules, all the regulations, how is that enforced?
I
think is
send
the
them a
big
letter.
issue.
I send them a letter. That's
so.
Chris is our enforcement.
only enforced.
And no, we can't control who sells their land, right? And that's just part of it. And we can all hope that everybody comes here with the same intentions we have, to leave big, beautiful trees, but again, we can't leave that to assumption. So how can we find that right spot in the middle so that we keep that,
You know, kind of ambiance and that kind of charm, and not overdo with ordinances and all this nonsense that it feels like, you know, with an HOA. So I think it's important that we figure out not just what guidelines we want, but how is it realistically going to be implemented? I think that's what we need to figure out, and then figure out once that structure's in place, okay, now what's realistic for this existing structure to be able to enforce? you know, like kind of start from that side and work back. Because I think we could all come down to, I mean, honestly, I think in an ideal world, anything over 2 acres, it would be great if we could send somebody out there and do a case by case thing, but that's probably not realistic, right? So that's what we've got to figure out is what is the accountability and enforcement going to look like? Then we can decide, okay, what's a realistic thing for our town? And I think kind of starting from that side might be a good idea.
Stay back here, got 2 comments.
Hey, I just want to make one point. There's a perfect example right now going on in the town. There's an institution that took down a lot of very, very large, beautiful old trees. The institution told a neighbor he was going to leave a buffer. He took down all the trees, and now there's no buffer. All these beautiful trees are now piled up in a big pile. So now they're not doing anything with the big pile. So not only is it a problem of taking down the larger trees, you know, how are you going to dispose of these trees? So now it's on a main thoroughfare, and the neighbors are all upset. Across the street, they're concerned. It's a very nice home for sale there. And it snowballs when you think about it. But that kind of situation needs some control, because to take down the volume of trees and the size of those trees, that was, it affected the whole community up there.
I used to like to tell people that you know how many trees it takes for one person to breathe. I know that.
I think Rosa and I are thinking about the same tract of land, which I don't know how many acres it is, but it doesn't appear to be that big. And then not only did they take all the trees down, but they came back and planted trees that are not local to this area.
Palm trees.
Palm trees. And they're not, I mean,
That's the
that's
thing.
ridiculous.
I think that's the slippery slope to go down, because what did it, you know, you gotta figure out where that stops, and I don't know where that
I
stops.
don't know either.
I mean, I think that's why I go back to the original thing I was saying, is you gotta focus on the things that we all agree on, that we don't wanna see, and the town doesn't wanna see, and tackle that, because that's a lot more straightforward. It gets really squirrely when you start going down.
Yeah, I agree with Tommy on the tree deal. It's the developers that need control. The individual landowner, and I know you don't agree with this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The individual landowner, if he owns 2, 3, 5 acres, if he don't like trees, it cuts down every one of them on his property. He's not gonna theoretically change the tree canopy of Bamback enough to affect the town and the way we feel that we're here. We just ride by and say, gosh, that's ugly, and just keep on riding. But, but I mean, you know, one individual, and there's bound to be one, I don't know anybody right off, but there's bound to be somebody that just don't like trees. You know, so they're just gonna get rid of them. And it's one person here and there, individual landowner, is not going to mess up the ambiance of the town. Now, but a big developer coming in and doing something like Sun City or Treetops, I was talking about Treetops. I remember when Sun City was back here on that board over there, they had a pretty picture of a couple elderly couple strolling around the ponds that used to be up there where Sun City is now, holding hands, walking under the pine trees. And then when they come in and bulldoze the whole place, in the business, we call it nuking, because I've been around house building for years. And, you know, we just call it nuking. You go in there and, you know, my part of it was on the other side of Charlotte, so I'm not guilty. But we built houses. It was already nuked when I got here, so. But, you know, a developer company can make a giant eyesore, but an individual here and there is not gonna make any difference. And there's a million reasons to cut trees. I cut down a beautiful old persimmon tree right beside my driveway. It's been there for 28 years, and I hated it for 28 years before I finally cut the thing. Because I just left it because it was a pretty tree. But the truth is, it dropped persimmons all over my driveway, ruined my cars, and it was a nuisance.
So there are a lot of reasons to cut trees. You know, it might be you just want to go out and blow off a little steam with your new chainsaw. But if you got the property and you want to do it, go for it. And, you know, leave private people, let them do what they do.
I think that's what we need to, really concentrate on, and with this don't happen, we can't stop it all. Don't happen. We need to be really concentrating on what kind of tree canopy or whatever you want to call it, that you require a board to stand on. That's where I think we need to concentrate.
The 1 acre lot size is a big buffer for that.
Well, you get somebody step back to you on a 1 acre lot with planting stuff. I mean, that's new, most of the time, but I say you gotta, let's just take this place down here on Riverside. Like 285 acres in that place, they cleared it. Bulldozed it all back. And the guy says that he's gonna plant crops on it for several years. But the money behind it is true home. So what does that tell you? And that's where when you do something like that, we need to have a plan in effect that a person goes in, like several hundred acres. You have to have at least 20-25% green space or something like that left in the development. And with your orders that you got now, it's saying 1 house per acre. That's gonna leave a lot of that'll leave a lot of candy. That's what we need to concentrate on.
So you raise an interesting point in that situation. Somebody buys 275 acres for agriculture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clears it
Here's
for agriculture.
where they're gonna run into problems.
And then flips it in 3 years. to-
They gotta change the zoning on that. I think the county's gonna look on that very, very nicely when they know that the true owns that. And they clear cut it, and then they made it agriculture for 3 years. And then they come back and want to put a bunch of housing development on it. It's not gonna fly very well.
It's not gonna fly.
But what's the tax base on houses?
True home is gonna come to us.
Oh, is that it?
They have
It's not in the.
It's just an
If it is-
example.
If it is in the city, but in case it was, we're the ones that's gonna have to face them down and their attorneys.
When they get rezoning from agricultural.
We have ordinances
We have ordinances and the,
in place.
no, yeah, but now they can't rezone to residential. It's
We have
had to
not
stay
rezoned anything.
forever until this commission agrees to change it. Yes, exactly.
Yes, sir.
Whatever sign, you sign, I mean, you can plant crops on it from now to eternity. Nobody's gonna say, I go to you, and you're gonna get your agriculture. It has nothing to do with the zoning. Now, if you don't want your land developed, there's a surefire way to keep it from ever happening. That is to put yourself in conservation. I can put you in touch with all veterans interests, the National Store interest, and they will put you up. And that is the way that anybody that doesn't want their land developed, they don't have to sell it, people, it don't matter what it's done for, it can be zoned for heavy industrial, but you can tie it up with conservation that says it'll never be. And that lasts forever.
Yeah, but there's a lot of restrictions on how close you put stuff to the stream. I've been told, I've looked into this, you can't have cows walking in ponds. So they're definite, I know exactly what you're talking about. But they are coming along with that are good many restrictions if you want to use your hands to land a certain place.
If you want to keep farming, you can keep farming. You want to keep growing trees, you keep growing trees. But there's no way like wherever you talk, and that's the point is, nobody's gonna make you develop a problem.
everything that's been said tonight, it looks to me like it's a simple thing. You come in and designate how you want these developers, what you want them to do, whether they got 1 lot, 100 lots, you restringent rules on what they can do. If they got 1 lot, you got so many square feet of the house, you got so many square feet of the drive, and then you just limit what they do. To me, it's simple.
I know Michael's been waiting.
First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I don't know some of you folks. My name's Michael Gilson, this is my wife's Jane.
There you go.
Yeah, we're gonna sing later, Michael.
She's kicking me in the leg. We gotta go, we gotta go. But anyway, we live over in Bournemouth, and everybody's made a lot of great comments, but I think I've been thinking about this from a slightly different perspective. And it's kind of twofold. First of all, when you start talking about preserving a certain tree, you call grand trees.
Yeah, they're grand, yeah.
Trees. So let's use that oak tree right there as an example. And it's got pine trees all around, right? And all kinds of saplings all around. It's not as simple as just preserving that one tree. You take all the protected trees out from around that base, and now the wind can blow that tree. Right? If that tree is 100 feet tall, now you've got to be 100 feet away from something before it creates liabilities, right? So when you start thinking about putting limits on how or where you can take a tree out or a clump of trees out or something like that, and you're going to do that by ordinance, that to me seems like the town's taking a lot of liability for the responsibility of, okay, you can't take that tree down, but you got to clear out all these other trees. Now we have a windstorm come down through here and that tree falls on somebody and hurts them. And they did that because the town told them that. So to my way of thinking, that's kind of setting us up for a pretty good liability.
I agree.
So, yeah, I understand going after the big developer. We moved here for the same reason. We didn't want to be up there. That's why we came here. But I think what you're talking about is fairly sticky. You have to pull that off. We've got to really be careful if we don't open the town up to a lot of liability. Anyway, that's my soapbox, folks.
Happy birthday.
Welcome, and what's for supper?
Pardon me?
We're taking them out to Outback.
Okay.
Ooh.
I actually got bit by a tick 2 years ago, so I have an allergy to meat. I can't eat any mammals.
What?
So it doesn't matter where I go. I get everywhere I go is chicken. Chicken.
We're glad y'all came. We appreciate you coming, appreciate your feedback.
Maggie, I'm gonna think about mine a little bit.
You know where I live.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
So just to come back to what we were discussing about people that buy land and obviously then maybe sell it to a developer and however they get it rezoned. Maybe we should kind of, as we're considering the developer stuff, but maybe like if you sell like a large lot that may be currently used for farming, you know, whether intentional or not, it's already flat, cleared off. Like maybe some sort of, okay, well, if you're gonna rezone this, then we have to have, you know, X number of trees planted, or I don't know if that's realistic.
Like the
I'm just
opposite.
thinking that way, if people are trying to skirt the system, it would kind of catch it on the other end.
So like the opposite of not letting them cut down will force them to plant trees.
Like if somebody bought, like say there's a big, you know, 20 acres of farmland. Okay, that they just turned into a farm, even 10 years ago, whatever, it's a farmland now, and then they're like.
I think I could live off this money the rest of my life. Let me sell my farmland to whoever, right? We can't control people selling their stuff. That's the bottom line that we can't forget.
And so we just, in those instances that we know will come, what can we do to kind of, people trying to skirt the system, kind of put them in their place, I guess. I don't know how everybody feels about that, but that's just a different way to think about it. So that if you do have
Have people being unethical, whether it's right or not, you're kind of catching them on the back end.
Well, if you want to do that, right. Some do say we don't do it. And you already have a place where you've got 25 cents tree canopy or green space.
Right.
Yeah, on that property.
Right, but if it had already been cleared for farming or whatever,
Does not make any.
they just gotta make sure, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Once you do change that agriculture from agricultural use to residential use, you follow the whole different ball of rules. Those rules have to get.
I'm just always like looking at how people might try to serve. I think that's a great way to do it. The only thing we'll have to be specific with, I believe, is, you know, a lot of times builders will clear cut and they're like, oh, we replaced 25% of trees, which like looks twigs like this. So we need to make sure that, especially for land that's already cleared off, you know, that you can't just
Cut them down and start fresh if there's no reason for it. I guess. I would
And
say.
you could look at it, you go do that. Hey, say, cover 200 acres. So many people on that property line, you cannot cut the trees. You got a buffer. Then you got the buffer around it, plus you got to keep 20 or 25%.
And,
You're thinking exactly.
yeah, I think that's.
Now you like it, you have it wrong.
Right.
I know.
I wish it's gonna be the same as it's been for my 65 years here, but I have seen firsthand, it's not. So we're gonna preserve what we can, the rest of it, there's not anything we can do.
If you don't do something, this is where you need to look at. On the board. And it was her people wanted to do it, but. But, there was plus.
Coming back, and things changed a little bit. It was, probably getting last time, when you said earlier.
In the 90s.
They're probably all dated.
I'll just be curious, because that's my kids were stealing from somebody else.
Correct.
Are there communities in South Carolina?
Charleston,
that
Beaufort, lots of them.
gone through this exercise, simply taking a bus, 20 minutes down time?
Yeah. And they will come and give presentations.
That's what we've been doing, is them giving us, you know, other communities, but Van Wyck and Charleston are two vastly different.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have paved roads and curb and gutter and those sorts of things. So they've been giving us other communities that have started down this path too.
Whose tree ordinance did we read?
So we've taken a look at two, Clover in South Carolina. And then we also took a look at, very nice, what Holly Springs did in North Carolina. Now, there are some real differences because, you know, we've got the right farm and the, you know, forestry piece, but both of those are smaller communities. That's where we started with that.
One more comment. When we were developing the town, and we had the help of Judge Chapter, kind of helping us along, he strongly recommended Baltimore. He said they are similar in size to us, and that's just a possibility. He said they have done a very, very good job.
They have that.
And the tree rules and regulations.
Actually, when we started, maybe that's, it was Walterboro that we started with. And when this commission first started, we jumped on the tree canopy and then had to move over to the comprehensive plan, but it was Walterboro that we based all of our original stuff on. It's a great starting point.
I think what we're hearing is that we should focus on the major land developing first, and then perhaps create or draft some sort of best practices for everyone else. Can't force you to, but based on information provided from the South Carolina Forestry Commission, here's how we recommend you here's what you should protect. Here's what you should not cut down. Maybe we can look at it that way, that approach.
Well, and Kip is right to a great extent, because he's talking about a 1 acre parcel. And then if the man that owns it, what man or woman owns 1 acre parcel wants to go in there and cut a tree down, if they want to cut 20 trees down on their parcel, what do we expect? They're not going to go down and, you know, like clear cutting, they're not going to cut the stumps off at a foot and just leave the stumps in the front yard. That man's going to go put the stumps up and plant grass. And so it's going to be a nice looking yard. I mean, anybody, the small landowners that and homeowners, when they go cut trees, it's totally a different situation. They're not clear cutting and leaving all that crap out there. That's their yard. So they're going to make it more yard. So we really don't have any reason to regulate something like that. And I don't think any of us up here really ever intended to regulate something like that.
No way.
So.
Something that should be considered with developers is that the trees that they plant be indigenous to the area.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You know,
You know, we want them to live beyond a couple of years.
Yeah, not just,
Tractor fairs are not local.
Yeah.
you can also ask them-
They don't sell them anymore now.
That's right.
Size, if when they plant them in their neighborhood. Disseminated builders did that all the time. If the tree, they call it your tree, and the big thing they did in the neighborhood, had to be at least 14 foot. And it had to be so many inches around.
I don't think that's being unfair.
A few years after that, those are nice looking trees.
That's right.
And you know, in no time, you don't have to wait 20 years to get a tree to walk under without hitting your head.
Well, and all the ordinances that we're working with up here, they all have guidelines for new development. That new development, they also require certain trees, certain size trees, certain heights, just like you talked about. And we all live under a tree ordinance right now. Like Lancaster County has a tree ordinance that we live under. The problem is it's not as it's not enforced. So this smaller community can do a whole lot better job than the massive Lancaster County in kind of policing the situation. So we can essentially take Lancaster County's that we're all living under right now anyway, and just enhance. If Lancaster County's got a 1 inch diameter tree that you got to put back when you cut down a 3 foot diameter tree, and you put back a 1 inch, we can require 14 foot, 6 inch tree. So that's part of what we want to gather information tonight, because our ordinance will have new trees specifications as well, or it should.
Yeah, it should look at different species, like South Carolina just outlawed the invasive
Pears.
Bradford pear. So I don't know how they enforce it or what.
They're not allowed to sell them
But you
anymore.
can't even sell Bradford pears in the state.
And if you cut one down, Clemson University will give you a new tree to replace it with.
Nice. So
yeah,
Maggie, what's the forward plan?
So at this point, we collected feedback tonight. We are back again in September so that folks that could not come tonight can continue to give us feedback. So we're still in collection mode so that people can give us feedback. We will be reaching out to see when the forestry commission can come. So we're still in fact finding. We're not in drafting of ordinances and bringing them forth. We're making sure we hear from the community before we do it. So that's where we are.
what does the timeline look like on that? I'm just thinking like if somebody bought land in the next month, like. is there-
You're covered under Lancaster. Correct.
There's a moratorium right now too.
Covered in Lancaster, and remember Lancaster's folks who brought you tree tops.
And any
I
of
made you a
Yeah.
personal promise 2
Yeah.
meetings ago that you're not gonna get a tree tops under this planning commission. You're not. It's not gonna happen.
But we want to do our due diligence with the citizens before we bring an ordinance.
This be included in the UDO? or this
Yes,
be separate?
ultimately
It
it
will.
will be in the UDO, but we just felt this was an important piece to put in place.
So Sheena, we're working on our UDO right now, which should take us about 9 to 12 months. So this would be a very important piece of that overall. plan.
And remember, we have a moratorium on the new developers. So
And how long is that?
right now for 6 months. And it could be extended, but it's a 6-month moratorium for us to get some of this stuff in place.
This just applies to the city of.
The town of Van Wyck, yeah.
Yeah.
So where's this product? I'm just curious, like, where that starts and stops. Yeah.
So it goes all the way to Tree House.
No, they're not annexed.
My side of the road.
It's a puzzle. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
If y'all want to get ready to get excited about something, get ready for that development. It's gonna go on the other side of that, on the other side of that. So,
Yeah, we can't do anything about that.
well, we can say something. No, I'm talking about.
It would be.
Oh, yeah.
There's a development going in there.
Yeah.
It's for sale. There will be development.
There's
There's a traffic study.
See?
That's what they could put, I mean.
In our ordinance, it's in place, right? It's 1 acre per lot. That's the entire thing. Is that correct?
That's our zoning. That's our zoning.
that's what we're living by.
Yeah.
That's for property, and it's gonna continue to come down that way, right? The high school's got me cut off 521. Van Wyck Road's gonna have me cut off. Waze tells me that the closest way to get Fort Mill to Wayne King is to go up I-77 now.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
my life's just gone to hell in the past year. So I don't think y'all got it so bad. Seriously, it's, we just,
It's coming.
it's coming, and we're gonna have to face it, and laughing and mocking the town of Van Wyck and explaining it's not the way. We need some facts. We need some people on board, because none of us has done this before, and I promise you, I haven't got a paycheck. I don't think any of these other people have. We're doing it for the fun of it.
Are there any other comments or questions for us tonight? Share? Really appreciate the engagement, everyone coming out and participating.
Great meeting.
Yeah, I think it's super productive. And I think we can certainly build on what we learned tonight as we move forward.
Yeah, we will, people next month will see your comments, what you have all said, not by name, but here's what we collected tonight as we go through the same exercise.
And if you know someone that is not here tonight that should know about this, please spread the word.
Spread the word, and I've even made offers to individuals to show them the presentation individually and get their votes.
We're not gonna do anything sneaky or stupid before the next meeting, I promise.
All right, so I'll move on to our next
meeting.
Wednesday, September 22nd.
Somebody bring some food.
That's our work session, right? September 8th. Okay. September 8th is a internal work session for.
It's the 22nd, it's a public meeting. Thank you all very much for coming.
Absolutely.
This was very productive, very informative. Yes.
Just the next work session, if everybody's available, September 8th. Are we good? Zoom. Okay.
No, we've
Sorry. Let Linda have it.